Hey there, I'm estate planning attorney Paul Rabelais, and in this video I'm going to discuss how Congress extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will affect federal estate tax planning. Okay, so before we get into what proposed legislation might do, let's talk about the current situation of the federal estate tax. The way it is now is for people who pass away in 2025, the first $13.99 million of assets that they have is exempt from this 40% federal estate tax. Worth noting that if you're married, then really each spouse gets a $13.99 million exemption. And as long as the planning is done correctly with all of the estate planning legal documents, married couples, each spouse gets to use their estate tax exemption, and estate tax really is never due until after the surviving spouse passes away. So as we talk about federal estate tax planning, we probably need to mention early on about the step up in basis rule, because that's going to impact what people do this year with their estate. The step up in basis rule, it's a great rule, and it allows the capital gains tax basis of an inherited asset to be adjusted to its fair market value at the time of the owner's death, reducing potential capital gains tax if the asset is later sold. Also worth noting that just over the years, the parents often give assets to their children before the parents die in some type of effort to reduce the estate tax, and parents often make gifts of this $19,000 annual exclusion limit without using their exemption, or sometimes parents will make larger gifts using some of their estate and gift tax exemption while they're alive. Okay, so now let's get into, well, I know I said this video was about what if Congress extends the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but first let's address what happens if Congress does nothing and passes no new estate tax legislation. Well, if they pass no new tax legislation, then the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will expire on December 31st of 2025. The federal estate tax exemption will be cut in half from its present $13.99 million to a little over $7 million, because it will be adjusted for inflation in 2026. If that happens, if Congress takes no action and the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expires, this would force many wealthy people to make large $14 million gifts at the end of 2025, because they'll want to use their higher $14 million gift and estate tax exemption while they have it, prior to that exemption being cut in half. Now, let's talk about what I think is the likely scenario that Congress does extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. Then, this current $13.99 million exemption will just continue to increase due to those inflation adjustments. So next year, the exemption will exceed $14 million. And if that's the case, if Congress does extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, then most wealthy people are thinking that there is no urgency for wealthy individuals or couples to quickly use their exemption through gifting, because the exemption is not being reduced. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a married couple, they're around 65 years old, and they're sitting on a $12 million estate. And they see that Congress does extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. So that exemption of $13.99 million for 2025 will just continue to increase gradually due to the inflation adjustments. Well, that 65-year-old couple is probably thinking, look, we have $12 million and probably more than we need. And while I realize that many people do give away some assets to their kids to get assets out of the estate before the parents die, that hypothetical couple may be saying, you know what, we're just gonna keep it all in our estate. We think that's the best way to keep the most of what we have in our family. We have $12 million. We're not going to give away any of it. We're just going to keep it. And they'll do that for maybe three reasons. Number one, they like having that control over their estate. They don't want to part with significant assets. They want to stay in control. Sure, they can do some things for their children if they want to during their lifetime, but they're not going to enter into any kind of formal gifting plan because they want to keep control of their estate. Number two, they're going to keep all of that in their estate because they feel like they'll never be subject to the federal estate tax. If the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act gets extended, then next year the estate tax exemption for married couples will be $29 or $30 million, $14 million plus each. So they're thinking, we'll just keep it all in our estate because we'll never be subject to the 40% federal estate tax. And then maybe the most important thing that motivates them to keep it all in their estate is they're thinking, if we just keep all of these assets in our estate, all of our appreciated stock, all of our appreciated real estate, other appreciated assets that we have, if we just keep it in our estate, we don't want to give it to our kids, because if we give it to our kids during our lifetime, they won't benefit from that step up in basis. They'll get a carryover basis. If we give assets to our children during our lifetime and then they sell those assets later, they'll have to pay capital gains tax on everything that they receive that exceeds our basis in the assets. However, if we keep all of those assets in our estate, and then our heirs will benefit from the step up in basis when we die. So all of that untaxed appreciation that has occurred over the years, all of that appreciation will never get taxed if that 65-year-old couple with a $12 million estate simply just keeps all of the assets in their estate, let the children or whoever inherit those assets with the step up in basis, and then those recipients or those heirs can then sell those assets without incurring any estate tax, or at least without incurring any capital gains tax. Or the only capital gains tax they would pay is on appreciation that occurred after the death of the person who left those heirs the inheritance. So anyway, hope that helps. More to come. We'll see you later.